Have you ever had a moment that changed your life in just a few seconds? A stranger calling your name in the dark, knocking at your hotel door at 5 a.m., a familiar face in a news article, connected to something unspeakable. Tonight's stories aren't just scary. They're the kind that could have happened to you. Enjoy. This story kind of creeps me out even to this day, but I have a pretty good one. I lived in Mesa, Arizona. When I was 10 years old, we lived in a rough area, but I was just a kid completely ignorant to the dangers of the world. I was walking back home from my friend's house, and my mother wanted me home by 9, and I would always start walking back at around 8:40 to make sure I wasn't late, and it's only like a couple blocks from my house, so it wasn't a super long distance. It was around the time of year when the sun would set at 5:30 and be dark well before 7 p.m., so it was very much nighttime. As I'm walking, I hear a woman calling my name. I turn to look and see it was one of my mom's friends, but she didn't know her too well. However, I just saw that she was familiar and won't say a name. But I turned around and said hello and smiled. She walked up to me and told me my mom had called her and asked her to come get me and ride me back because something happened at my house. She said it was an emergency and that I needed to go with her and her husband, whom my family was also familiar with. I was only about 5 minutes from my house, but I was told it was an emergency and I agreed to go with her. As I'm walking, I get this weird feeling in my gut and this shaking in my legs that I now today realize was my instincts being on high alert. I stopped for a minute, asked if we could call my mom, and she said my mother was in the hospital right now and that I need to hurry. Right as we were opening the door to the car, I hear my mother shout my name as loud as she can, and I turned on a dime and quickly walked towards my mom. My mom asked what's going on, and the woman replies and says that she was just giving me a ride home because she saw me. It was not the story she gave me, so I told my mother what she told me and asked what was going on. My mom just looked at me, and she could always tell when I'm lying and when I'm telling the truth. The woman then goes to interrupt me, likely to lie, and my mom cuts her off and just stared back at her with the most shocked look ever, and these words still send shivers down my spine. She says in the most shocked voice ever, "You were trying to take my son." And the husband looks out the window, hurrying his wife in the car, and as I looked back towards him, I can see a syringe on the dashboard leaning against the windshield that he grabs right as I see it. She gets in the car, because at that point my mom was ready to kill her and reached into her purse because she keeps a pocket knife. But they drove away, and right after they did, my mom looked at me and just burst into tears saying, "I almost lost you." My mom knew full well what was happening, and I was still too shaken to even say anything and just hugged her back, and we went home. I was still in denial, and to cope, I would convince myself that maybe I wasn't in any danger. My family, of course, never kept in contact with any of them, but my stepdad at the time submitted a tip to the police of the incident. When they caught up with him about 3 months later, we had found out that he was arrested for having CP on his computer and found restraints in his closet, as well as some containers of propofol. They found pictures of me from my mom's Facebook downloaded on his computer as well, leading them to believe that I was actually being watched for a good bit. I never liked talking about it because to this day, if I hadn't stopped for those 10 seconds to ask the woman to call my mom, I don't know where it'd be or if it'd even be alive right now making this comment. And while it may seem like something that would have easily been forgotten, it was never the case for me. I haven't even told my closest friends this story, but I might sometime soon. I asked my mom what happened that night, why she came looking for me. She described the same feeling I remembered feeling moments before I was almost abducted, just a lot sooner than I did, and just had the instinct that I was in danger. I'm not usually a lucky person. It seems the odds are always against me, but I always remember how lucky I was that night, that my mom decided to listen to her instincts when I didn't. I've never ignored my instincts since, and every night after that, when I finally did decide to leave my house, My mom would walk with me all the way up until I turned 13 to come back to live with my dad, and that to date is the scariest thing I think I've ever experienced. It's some shit you only hear of on the news, and nobody ever assumed it will happen to them. But my life was a mere 20 seconds from being completely different. My girl and I were flying into her hometown after being out pursuing around the country for Thanksgiving. It was a few days earlier than scheduled, so we didn't tell any of her family, or mine, who also flew in, because we had been spending Thanksgiving together for the last few years. We honestly didn't utter a word. This was back in 1992, so there were no cell phones and no tracking abilities or any of that BS. Anyway, we got into town late at night. 11 p.m., 12 a.m. We had decided that we were going to stay in a hotel since the plan was to surprise the family, and while showing up on their doorstep late at night would have certainly surprised them, that wasn't really the kind we were going for. We get into our room. It's got a kitchenette, a couch, a TV, a king bed, it all around probably one of the nicer places we've stayed in. I pass out immediately. She takes a shower. From what she's told me, she lays in bed, unable to sleep until about 2 a.m. For context, we were in an extended stay hotel with a door that led right out into the parking lot. There was a sliding glass door to the left of the bed. Straight ahead was the couch, the door, a desk, and a smaller window. Blinds were shut on the sliding glass door, but on the smaller window, I guess they were open a crack, but when she realized she was so tired, she didn't care all that much. Our room was completely dark, so it wasn't really like anybody could see in any way kind of mentality. As she turns over to go to sleep at 2 a.m., through the slightly open blinds at the smaller window, she sees a flash, like a camera flash. But because the parking lot is 50 steps away, she just simply assumes that it's a street light and doesn't think anything of it, and falls asleep. 5 a.m. rolls around, and I'm woken up to loud knocking on the sliding glass door. She wakes up only a few seconds after I do, and is just as confused and disoriented as I am. Continuous, persistent knocking. I had half a mind to just assume that it was some drunkard. It was the holidays after all, who had come back from a night out and made a wrong turn somewhere while trying to get back to his room, but was sure he was where he was supposed to be. Knocking stops briefly, then starts on the front door. I want to further emphasize how this knocking was. Not quite a police knock, but someone was sure that they wanted into this room and wasn't going to stop until they got in. I go over to the door to look through the peephole, and I don't see anybody. The knocking starts again on the sliding glass door. If it was someone trying to wake up whoever they were with because they got locked out of their room, wouldn't they be announcing themselves? Wouldn't they be calling out the name of the person that they were trying so desperately to wake up? Like I said, the knock wasn't quite police. So I know that it wasn't them. They would have made sure everyone knew they were there had it been. I go back to the sliding glass door and stand there. The knocking persists. Once it stops, I peel the curtain back just enough that I can see out of the window. I'm pretty blind without contacts and didn't have my glasses on, so I am practically pressing my face up to the glass to see who I can see, and I see nobody. The second that I shut the blinds, the knocking starts again. At this point, I'm freaked out. I was trying to keep my composure as to not make my girl unsettled, but we're both already past that point. Nobody knows that we're here. Nobody that would want to pull a prank on us. None of our family, our friends, nobody. The only person that knows we're here was the older man who checked us in. And why the hell would he care where we are? I'm borderline a little worried for our safety. If whoever was out there managed to get in and had cruel intentions upon entering, I'm a small guy. I'm 5'8", and 125 pounds soaking wet. I can talk a lot of crap and can throw a punch. But if somebody bigger than I really wants to kick my ass, they'll be able to do it no problem. I call up to the front desk as the knocking doesn't stop, and on the second ring, the man who checked us in answers and seems concerned as to why I'm calling at this hour. I explain the situation. The knocking is still happening as I'm on the phone, and he tells me that he's going to send the security guard over to check it out. The knocking continues on for about another minute, not even probably 2 or 3 minutes after the knocking stops. I get a call back from the front desk who says that security didn't see anybody, didn't see any signs of anybody, but that he apologizes for whatever happened. Super comforting. Neither one of us fell back asleep until it was light out, and when we went out later in the day, there was a singular footprint leading away from the sliding glass door. Weird, because we were in a nice part of town. It was a place she grew up in, and therefore felt safe in, knowing the area as well as she did. That's one of the reasons we chose to stay at this place. It was horrible. We are both still stumped as to what the situation was. I don't know. I still get uncomfortable just thinking about it, really. Jenny had always been afraid of the dark. She had lost her sight at a young age, and the world had always been a scary place for her. But she had learned to cope, and she had always felt safe as long as she was with her husband. He was her rock, her guide, and she trusted him with all her heart. So when he went away on a business trip, leaving her alone in their house, Jenny was terrified. She had never been alone before, and the thought of it filled her with dread, but she knew that she had to be strong. She was a grown woman, and she couldn't let her fears get the best of her, so she went about her day, doing all the things she normally did. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, and listened to her audiobooks. And every night, when she went to bed, she cuddled up next to her husband's pillow, pretending that he was there with her. It was a strange and unsettling routine, but it gave Jenny comfort. She knew that she was safe, and that was all that mattered. But one night, as she lay in bed, something changed. Jenny felt a presence in the room, a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that it was just her imagination. But as the minutes ticked by, the feeling grew stronger. Jenny couldn't take it anymore. She reached out and touched her husband's pillow, hoping to feel his familiar warmth. But instead of the soft cotton she expected, she felt something cold and clammy. She recoiled in horror, her heart racing as she realized that she wasn't alone. There was something in the room with her, something evil and malevolent. She could feel its presence, its breath on her neck, and she knew that she had to get out. She scrambled out of bed and ran for the door, her hands outstretched as she tried to find her way. She could hear the thing behind her, its footsteps pounding the floor as it followed her. She stumbled and fell, her hands scraping the floor as she tried to crawl away. She could feel the thing closing in, its hot breath on her neck as it prepared to strike. Just when she thought it was all over, she heard a voice in the darkness. It was her husband, his voice full of concern as he called out to her. Jenny's heart soared with hope. She struggled to her feet and ran towards the sound of his voice, her hands outstretched as she tried to find him. But as she drew closer, she realized that something was wrong. The voice was different, deeper and more sinister. It was the monster, mimicking her husband's voice in order to lure her in. Jenny froze in terror, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way out. She couldn't let the monster win. Not after everything she had been through. She turned and ran, her feet pounding the floor as she fought to escape. She could hear the monster behind her, its footsteps growing louder and louder as it closed in. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running, but she knew that she had to try. She had to survive, no matter what. But it was too late. The monster was too fast, and before Jenny knew what was happening, it was on top of her. She screamed as it tore into her flesh, its razor-sharp claws slicing through her skin. She fought with all her might, but it was no use. The monster was too strong, and Jenny knew that she was doomed. She closed her eyes, accepting her fate as the monster's claws dug into her flesh. Bizarre mystery that made it to news opens up a rabbit hole of dark, dysfunctional family secrets, and the photo on the article unlocks a memory of someone familiar. Back when I had just been enrolled into school as a kid, all the way till we were in Standard 4, our school had a music teacher who was just this wonderful lady with such a pleasant, calming, soothing demeanor and voice. She was a wonderful music teacher, and thanks to her, I had taken up a great passion in music since school. She was in her 40s, but was most probably single. We thought it is important to mention that in my country, women are still shamed and looked down upon if they choose to stay unmarried post their 30s. Also, for some reason, most of our teachers were married and would talk about family and would try to convince the single teachers to find someone, which is happening to me as of now as I hit my 30s. Therefore, a lot of teachers would try to set her up, so she once said, "I am married to my music and to God." The teachers murmured amongst themselves, but never brought up the hitching thing again, at least in front of us, the students. She had a strikingly comforting and warm smile with a very pleasant voice and soft tone, but was a woman of few words who mostly liked to mind her own business. She would spend the day sitting in the music room, practicing or in between a class, or at the piano in the auditorium. I did see her talk to other faculty members in a few instances, but she did not spend as much time with them as they did with one another. She rarely ever spoke, unless it was about the music classes or practices. She looked and dressed uniquely. She would wear this A-line skirt all the way from above her waistline, always with a tucked-in full-sleeve shirt and a sleeveless overcoat. She would wear different variations of this attire every day. She also had very curly hair, cut to a bob, and wore a pair of glasses with thick black frames. There seemed to be absolutely nothing too striking or peculiar about her, just unique. Since I come from a culture where most of our teachers wore traditional clothing and are pretty too involved with the students and school activities. She left the school when I was in 5th standard. We all bid her a warm welcome. I remember feeling quite sad, actually. It had been years since then. I was now living in another city altogether, going to my 2nd year of university, when one morning I read a bizarre news article that was freshly breaking from my home city and gaining traction nationwide. It was one of the weirdest, most bizarre true crimes mysteries I had ever read, as it happened in my hometown. I was obviously extra interested. A father had self-immolated in the bathroom of a very old house in a posh, quiet neighborhood of the city. The son was completely unaware and looked disturbed. On further investigation, police found 4 other dead bodies in the house. Nicely nestled on a bed, in a room with fresh food served, incense burning and music playing, were the dead bodies, decomposed skeletal remains of the daughter's sister, with 2 other dogs on either side of hers. The windows and ventilations of the room were carefully boarded and blocked. The son brother was called in for questioning. He had been living with the corpse for a very long time. Police soon discovered that the brother was mentally unstable, and there was way more to the story than they could ever fathom. They found out that the family did not speak to each other directly, but communicated only through chits, the messages on which were bizarre and eerie. The brother maintained a journal, which not only indicated towards his deteriorating mental health, but also revealed dark, dysfunctional, abusive, and incestuous family secrets with possible hints of necrophilia and cult-like religious practices. It was a strangely tragic case, with a very deep and dark insight. What struck out to me suddenly was the name of the woman whose skeletal remains had been discovered. It sounded way too familiar. I searched up some more and found another article, this time with a photo of the deceased woman. To my utter shock, surprise, and disbelief, it was our first school music teacher. This was her dead body, the story of her residence and probably her life, which I had absolutely no idea about prior to this. Though most details of the case were never revealed, and there were all kinds of weird rumors about the case, I believe what little information was available. Mental health has its way with people. That is what makes this so sad. It was horrifying. For some reason, I felt terribly sad and surprised. She taught us such wonderful music, taught us so many wonderful songs, was such a wholesome person altogether, and this is how things ended for her. Seemed unbelievable. 2 years later, the brother also self-immolated. I often remember her sitting at the piano, smiling widely at my younger self with a soft voice saying, "Good, I just wish somebody could help her when there was time. The Blue Hole is a 100-meter deep sinkhole on the coast of the Red Sea, 5 miles north of Dahab, Egypt. Its nickname is the Divers' Cemetery. Divers in Dahab say 200 died in recent years. Many of those who died were attempting to swim under the arch. Many certified scuba divers think they are capable of just going a little deeper, but they don't know that there are special gas mixtures, buoyancy equipment and training required for just another few meters of depth. Imagine this: you take your PDI open water diving course and you learn your dive charts, buy all your own gear and become familiar with it. Compared to the average person on the street, you're an expert now. You go diving on coral reefs, a few shipwrecks, and even catch lobster in New England. You go to visit a deep spot like this, and you're having a great time. You see something just in front of you, this beautiful cave with sunlight streaming through, and you decide to swim just a little closer. You're not going to go inside it. You know better than that, but you just want a closer look. If your dive computer starts beeping, you'll head back up, so you swim a little closer and it's breathtaking. You are enjoying the view and just floating there, taking it all in. You hear a clanging sound. It's your dive master rapping the butt of his knife on his tank to get someone's attention. You look up to see what he wants. But after staring into the darkness for the last minute, the sunlight streaming down is blinding. You turn away and reach to check your dive computer, but it's a little awkward for some reason, and you twist your shoulder and pull it towards you. It's beeping and the screen is flashing go up. You stare at it for a few seconds, trying to make out the depth and tank level between the flashing words. The numbers won't stay still. It's really annoying. And your brain isn't getting the info you want at a glance. So you let it fall back to your left shoulder, turn towards the light, and head up. The problem is that the Blue Hole is bigger than anything you've ever dove before, and the crystal clear water provides a visibility that is 10x what you're used to in the dark waters of St. Lawrence, where you usually dive. What you don't realize is that when you swam down a little farther to get a closer look, thinking it was just 30 or 40 feet more, you actually swam almost twice that, because the vast scale of things messed up your sense of distance. And while you were looking at the archway, you didn't have any nearby reference point in your vision. More depth is more pressure, and your BCD, the air-filled jacket that you use to control your buoyancy, was compressed a little. You were slowly sinking and had no idea. That's when the dive master began banging his tank, and you looked up. This only served to blind you for a moment and distract your sense of motion and position even more. Your dive computer wasn't sticking out on your chest below your shoulder when you reached for it, because your BCD was shrinking. You turned your body sideways while twisting and reaching for it. The 10 seconds spent fumbling for it and staring at the screen brought you deeper, and you began to accelerate with your jacket continuing to shrink. The reason that you didn't hear the beeping at first, and that it took so long to make out the depth between the flashing words, was the nitrogen narcosis. You have been getting depth drunk, and the numbers wouldn't stay still because you are still sinking. You swim towards the light, but the current is pulling you sideways. Your brain is hurting, straining for no reason, and the Blue Hole seems like it's gotten narrower, and the light rays above you are going at a funny angle. You kick harder just to keep going up toward the light, despite this damn current that wants to push you into the wall. Your computer is beeping incessantly, and it feels like you're swimming through mud. Fuck this. You grab the fill button on your jacket and squeeze it. You're not supposed to use your jacket to ascend, as you know that it will expand as the pressure drops, and you will need to carefully bleed off air to avoid shooting up to the surface. But you don't care about that anymore. Shooting up to the surface is exactly what you want right now, and you'll deal with bleeding air off and making depth stops. When you're back up with the rest of your group, the sound of air rushing into your BCD fills your ears, but nothing's happening. Something doesn't sound right, like the air isn't filling fast enough. You look down at your jacket, searching for whatever the trouble might be, when thwunk you bump right into the side of the giant sinkhole. What the hell? Why is the current pulling me sideways? Why is there even a current in an empty hole in the middle of the ocean? You keep holding the button. Inflate. Goddammit. Inflate. Your computer is now making a frantic screeching sound that you've never heard before. You notice that you've been breathing heavily. It's a sign of stress. And the sound of air rushing into your jacket is getting weaker. Every 10 meters of water adds another 1 atmosphere of pressure. Your tank has enough air for you to spend an hour at 10 meters and to refill your BCD more than 100 times. Each additional 20 meters of depth cuts this time in half. This assumes that you are calm, controlling your breathing, and using your muscles slowly with intention. If you panic, begin breathing quickly and move rapidly. This cuts your time in half again. You're certified to 20 meters, and you've gone briefly down to 30 meters on some shipwrecks before. So you were comfortable swimming to 25 meters to look at the arch. While you were looking at it, you sank to 40 meters, and while you messed around looking for your dive master and then the computer, you sank to 60 meters. 6 atmospheres of pressure. You have only 10 minutes of air at this depth. When you swam for the surface, you had become disoriented from twisting around and then looking at your gear, and you were now right in front of the archway. You swam into the archway thinking it was the surface. That's why the blue hole looked smaller now. There is no current pulling you sideways. You are continuing to sink to the bottom of the arch. When you hit the bottom and started to inflate your BCD, you are now over 90 meters. You will go through a full tank of air in only a couple of minutes at this depth. Panicking like this, you're down to seconds. There's enough air to inflate your BCD, but it will take over a minute to fill. And it doesn't matter, because that would only pull you into the top of the arch, and you will drown before you get there. Holding the inflate button, you kick as hard as you can for the light. Your muscles are screaming, your brain is screaming, and it's getting harder and harder to suck each panicked breath out of your regulator. In a final fit of rage and frustration, you scream into your useless reg, darkness squeezing into the corners of your vision. 4 minutes. That's how long your dive lasted. You died in clear water on a sunny day in only 4 minutes. It is a pretty recent story. I have dealt with weird situations many times during my life, from soft stalking to people following me in alleys and people threatening me. This is exactly what I will be talking about here. It was around a few years ago when I wasn't legal age yet. It was a pretty dark time in my life. I would hang out in forums and talk to anyone there. Yes, you would have guessed it, right? I used to go on 4chan. I know it is a pretty bad start for the story, but it just gets worse the more I go. I'm not completely innocent in this story, as I could have blocked the man way earlier back. Anyway, I managed to get someone to add me back on Discord. Nothing wrong was really apparently, since I had found him in Mewboard. It's a music forum. The only place where no creeps actually hand out. Him and I talked a lot, and he was a relatively interesting, knowledgeable person. I don't remember his age, but I know he was around 8 years older than me. Because of how isolated I just didn't care. Until he started getting a bit too personal with me, asking me questions on where I lived, what country and region. I didn't think much of it and told him it. He shared his state in return. Slowly by slowly, I started telling him about my life, my problems and my situation. He was funny and relatable. Sometimes he would just ask really weird questions such as, were you groomed as a kid? I know a lot of girls isolated on the internet are. It always took me off guard. But he was my only friend, right? He was just curious. Soon enough, he told me that he liked younger girls, that it was easier to talk to them. It always made me a bit uncomfortable, but at the same time it was convenient since I knew he would appreciate me. He started asking normal pictures of me. A night. One night where I didn't text him, I receive a DM from him. A video of him jerking off to my picture on his screen. He was whispering things he would do to me. The way he would find me and bring his fantasy of raping me come true. It went further than it, but I don't remember exactly the words that came out from him. I froze in front of my phone. I didn't know how to react of what to say. I was speechless. I was unable to do anything. I just ignored it, and he continued to text me, as if he had never sent me it. I pretended I didn't see either, and just continued talking to him, despite always being scared of him. I started noticing how he would say slurty words, and unsettling comments of being a stalker, and being smart enough to find me. P.S. I never gave him my address, just my town, and I am a continent away from him. When I started distancing myself, he sent me one last text telling me he would come here and do all the things he said, that I wasn't safe despite being all the way here. I blocked him right after this. It was my breaking point, and he didn't have a job either, so he could never come here and find me. Less than a month passed. He had managed to make some money to book a flight all the way to where I lived. He was there in town, in my street. He knew enough about me to know when I was alone in my house. And on a lucky day, I was outside and came home the next day, as I stayed at a friend's house for the night. When I came back home to see my neighbor's door broken open, wide open, she was also a woman, but she lived with her husband. I worried for her, and I rushed in knocking on the open door signaling I was there. I searched her house and looked for her. She was on the ground alone, terrified. I ran to her asking her what happened. The whole house was wrecked, her clothes stolen, and a knife was scattered there left on the ground. She opened up to me telling me that a man came into her house and broke there to steal her undergarments with some of her belongings. When he had noticed it wasn't my house, he probably went crazy and broke everything. I was more than relieved that she wasn't harmed, and she came into the house, being to find it like that, all broken with her clothes stolen. We both called the cops and her husband to come help us. They were never able to find the man. I myself didn't know enough about him to do anything either. She moved out a year later, and me and my mother also went to a new neighborhood. He probably still tries to stalk me, but it has been years and I am now doing okay. The paranoia never truly leaves, but I am able to go on with my life and relatively forget about him. I hope everyone is safe and no other women were targeted by him. That's it for tonight's terrifying stories. Subscribe for more real horror from the darkest corners of the internet. And remember, sometimes the scariest moments only last a few seconds, but they can change everything.